Hey ladies and gentlemen, Wolf Crier here, and welcome to my first Necromancer build guide. So this build guide is going to focus on the Rathma set, and this is the pet build that I currently use. I have personally done an 80 GR with mediocre gear, which is pretty decent in my opinion. I mean, some of my gear even still has decks on it from my monk. This build focuses on your skeletal mages and your command skeleton skills, as well as Army of the Dead. Now, the first thing I want to do before we get into the gear is take a look at what stats you are looking for. Obviously, you are looking for intelligence and vitality, but your other main stats that you are looking for are going to be critical hit chance, critical hit damage, area damage, and physical damage, as well as cooldown and resource cost reduction are also very useful. Alright, let's take a look at the gear. The first thing you're going to want is the full 6-piece set bonus for the Bones of Rathma set. For the 2-piece set bonus, your minions have a chance to reduce the cooldown of Army of the Dead by 1 second each time they deal damage. And for the 4-piece set bonus, you gain 1% damage reduction for 15 seconds each time one of your minions deal damage. Max is 50 stacks, so you get a 50% damage reduction as long as your minions are all attacking pretty much. Now for the 6-piece set bonus, each active skeletal mage increases the damage of your minions and Army of the Dead by 250%. And the goal here is to keep all 10 skeletal mages out as often as possible. Now another set that you will be using is the Jesseth Arms set, the 2-piece set that contains the one-handed scythe and the shield. Now the set bonuses for this set are: when the target of your command skeletons dies, your skeletons are automatically commanded to attack a nearby target. While your skeletons are commanded to attack a target, all of your minions deal 400% increased damage. This is going to combine really well with your Rathma set and your skeletal mages, etc. Now another set that I use is the Endless Walk set, the Compass Rose Traveler's Pledge. The 2-piece set bonus: while moving, damage taken is reduced by up to 50%, and while standing still, damage dealt is increased by 100%. For your other ring, you're looking for Crispin's Sentence. You deal up to 100% increased damage against slowed enemies, or triple this bonus against enemies afflicted by any other type of control impairing effect, like a stun or a freeze. Now for your belt, you're looking for Dainty's Bindings. You gain up to an additional 50% damage reduction when there is an enemy afflicted by your Decrepify. So pretty much you want to make sure there is at least one mob with Decrepify on it at all times, and that'll reduce the damage that you take. Next up, for your bracers, I currently use Ancient Parthen Defenders. Each stunned enemy within 25 yards reduces your damage taken by 12%. I personally still find this build a bit squishy, so Ancient Parthen Defenders definitely helps with your damage mitigation. Now, a couple other options for your bracer slot would be Reaper's Wraps, which are very useful in regaining essence. You've got Strong Arm Bracers, could be very useful because that knockback from your Army of Dead. And you've also got Nemesis Bracers, which will spawn an Elite Pack. You can mess around with this, but I think once you reach the 80 GR, you're going to want Ancient Parthen Defenders. Now, in your cube, for the weapon slot, you will be using Tragoul's Corroded Fang. The Cursed Scythe rune for Grim Scythe now has a 100% chance to apply a curse. That part is unimportant. The important part is you deal 200% increased damage to cursed enemies. The goal is keep your Decrepify on everything you possibly can, and then you will gain that 200% increased damage. For the armor slot, I use Tasker and Theo. Increase the attack speed of your pets by 50%. This is a pet build. And for your ring, you're looking for Circle of Niluge's Evolve. You now raise an additional Skeletal Mage with each cast, and they last an additional 4 seconds. This is very, very useful in getting those mages out because you now cast 2 at a time instead of 1, and they last longer. So you can keep those 10 out to get that 2,500% damage bonus pretty much all the time. Now let's take a look at the legendary gems. So you're going to be running Bane of the Trapped. Increase damage against enemies under the effects of control impairing effects by a certain percentage. And you gain an aura that reduces the movement speed of enemies within 15 yards. That part with this build, the way I run it, is not so necessary because you will be using a lot of cold skills, which is going to slow everything down. So you're going to get that damage bonus anyways, but I run this like a ranged caster type. Speaking of which, your next gem is Zay's Stone of Vengeance. Damage you deal is increased by a certain percentage for every 10 yards between you and the enemy hit. And you gain a 20% chance on hit to stun the enemy for 1 second, which is very useful in also proccing your Crispin's ring. Now for the last gem, I use Enforcer. Increase the damage of your pets by a certain percent, and your pets take 90% less damage. Now with these legendary gems, the Zay's Stone of Vengeance you could swap out. If you are having survivability issues, I would look at maybe an Esoteric, Bane of the Powerful, that type of thing. Bane of the Powerful will give you more damage and reduce the damage taken by elites. So you have room to play with your gems, but Enforcer and Bane of the Trapped are absolutely necessary to this build. I personally like Zay's better because I try to stay out of the fight as much as possible because, like I said, this build can be pretty squishy indeed. Alright, so now let's take a look at the skills. What we have first is Bone Spikes, Sudden Impact. I know it says Frost Spikes up there, but I go with the Bone Spikes. Because the Bone Spikes allow you to stun your enemies for 1 second, which is going to trigger that Crispin's ring, which is very, very useful in increasing your damage substantially. Now this is going to be your only source of creating essence for yourself unless you are wearing Reaper's Wraps. I do not use any other generator whatsoever for my essence. I just use Bone Spikes. Next up we have Decrepify, Dizzying Curse. Decrepify, remember, is going to proc your Dainty's Belt as well as your Trangules in your cube. So Decrepify is very, very useful and you want to keep it on the mobs at all times. This is going to slow the mobs as well as give them a 10% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds when hit, which is again going to proc that Crispin Sentence ring. And it's also going to reduce the damage that those enemies do to you by an additional 30%. Now next up we have Command Skeleton's Frenzy. You're going to use this to send your skeletons to attack whatever your target is, and Frenzy is going to increase their attack speed by 25% when they do it, in addition to proccing that 400% damage increase for all of your minions. Now the next thing I use is Bone Armor Dislocation. Once again, this is yet another stun. Enemies hit by your Bone Armor are stunned for 2 seconds. I use Bone Armor because, like I said, this build can get pretty squishy, especially once you get up there past the 80 GR mark. And this is going to give you 3% damage reduction up to 10 stacks, so 30% damage reduction at 10 stacks. And next up we have Skeletal Mage. I use the Skeleton Archer. Skeleton Archers increase your attack speed by 3% for 5 seconds each time they deal damage. And like I said, you're going to want to keep 10 Skeletal Mages out at all times, or as often as you possibly can. Then I use Army of the Dead. Raise a massive skeletal army to pummel the target location, dealing 12,000% weapon damage as physical in a 15-yard radius. This is a massive damage skill, and you're going to want to utilize this when there are a ton of mobs around, because it's just going to suck them all into the middle, which is going to proc your Crisbins. It's going to deal a ton of damage. You also want to make sure you have 10 Skeletal Mages out when you proc this, because that is going to give you another 2,500% on top of this. That's going to be crazy, crazy damage. This skill deals a wicked, massive amount of damage. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the passive skills. Number 1, I use Extended Servitude. Increase the duration of your Skeletal Mage and revive minions by 25%. Very useful to keep your Skeletal Mages up as long as possible. Then I use Spreading Malediction. Receive a 1% damage bonus for each enemy afflicted by one of your curses. And since you want to keep Decrepify on everything you possibly can anyways, this is going to increase your damage quite a bit. Then I use Rathma's Shield. You cannot lose life for 4 seconds after using Land of the Dead, Army of the Dead, or Simulacrum. Now I use this because after casting Army of the Dead, it's very, very beneficial. Make sure you can't die for 4 seconds after you cast it. Now, the buggy portion of this that allowed people to make builds that allowed them not to die ever has been fixed, but this is still a very, very useful passive. And the last one I use, Final Service, which is yet another get out of jail free card when you were about to die. And this effect cannot occur more than once every 60 seconds, and all of your minions are consumed to heal you for 10% of your life, so it can be very, very useful. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so there you have my first build guide for the Necromancer, my Petmancer build that I currently run. I will be working on the Bone Armor set next and trying to get a build guide out for you guys. So let me know in the comments below what you think of this video. Hopefully it brought you guys a little bit of help when building your Petmancer, and definitely hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and you guys have a great day. Peace.